Hello, ni hao, hi, hi, bonjour. How you doing, cousins? You didn't know I was bilingual, did you? I'm not. I wish I was. I did like Spanish too back in the day. Didn't make it very far with that. But this video is finding you because allegedly you're missing someone who is just not in your best interest to want back or wanting something that doesn't want you, whether even it's a job or friends. It could be different things that you miss, but shouldn't or can't want back for one reason or another. This podcast, oh, yeah, we're going to get to it. Whether you're limerent, and we're going to get into what that means, or whether you tend to ruminate and it's like, oh my gosh, I just can't escape the thoughts. Or for one reason or another, it is just so painfully difficult to move forward. Let's get to it. If you're new here, welcome, Percy Ponders. That's the name of the podcast. And this is a space for sensitive and thoughtful cousins where we figure out life and love together. Cool. Now, let's start with the romantic situation. We can get to friends and work and stuff. Do you really miss them? Or do you miss the validation? Come on. Or do you miss who they could have been if they lived up to their potential? Ooh, yeah, okay. A little shade. Do you miss them or do you simply miss the convenience of having someone to call and spend time with, right? Do you really miss them? Or do you simply miss all of the things they represented, but ultimately weren't? Because for one reason or another, what you thought would be is not. You know what I mean? So that in of itself suggests you are holding on to a fantastical idea of what you would have liked rather than the reality of what is. And in the words of Mrs. Lauren Hill, the iconic Lauren Hill, fantasy is what people want, but reality is what they need. Okay, somebody, you know what I mean? And we got to get to the business of reality here. Because what I've noticed as somebody who has come out of many of achy breaky heart situation over the years is uh, if you aren't careful, you put people on a pedestal they never deserve to be on. If you aren't careful, you forget your power in all this, which is your ability to turn the page, to collect your goodies, and move forward. If you aren't careful, you forget that you still got time on the clock, and that's good. That's a competitive advantage. If you aren't careful, you forget that one of the best glow ups is to just keep getting better in all the right ways. It's to just keep getting smarter. You know what I mean? To collect all the lessons from what didn't work and move forward with the victory. If you aren't careful, you forget that you're indeed hot sauce. And I'm not just blowing smoke up your hooter tooter. Okay? I'm not. This is factual because cousins are hot sauce. And some of the sweetest, kindest, most thoughtful individuals hurt the most in the wake of relational dynamics that did not go to plan. Ask me how I know. I'm not a special tulip per se, but I have been through, as I mentioned, many a low. Let me tell you about one. So it was a few years ago that I broke up with somebody who I thought I would marry. Who would have thought that you meet somebody you think is so special and you're like, okay, we're going to get married and we just see this. And then it ends up going absolutely south. Total 180 from what you thought it would be. Yeah. And then here I am feeling like Boo Boo the Fool. If you guys don't know who that is, Google him. Like, wow, this did not go to plan. Just we were incompatible. And there was this weird interracial dynamic that was just so not it. It was not me giving away my power. It was more just, wow, I realize how little you understand and value me. You know what I mean? I made a whole different video podcast on that. I get into interracial versus intraracial dating. Check that out if you haven't. And so anyway, what's the whole point with this relationship debacle I had? It was, wow, well, okay, in the wake of this breakup, I'm missing something that it is not in my best interest to want back. You know what I'm saying? And that's when it's hardest to move forward. But eventually, with time and actually facing the feelings, even on those days where it felt like, oh, there is no way I can get through this, there's no way. I realized time actually can heal wounds when you actively address your wounds and heal them and tend to your wounds. Put the gauze on them. You know what I'm saying? Put the A&D ointment on the wounds. Time alone doesn't heal all the wounds. But when you really tend to them with the gauze of therapy and reading and plugging into spaces like this, with the ointment of being good community, with like-minded, hopeful, good-spirited individuals, time really does start to heal the wounds, and eventually you stumble back into being hot sauce. So where does this bring us? Brings us back to you don't or won't miss them nearly as much as you might miss some of what they represent in time. That might be really hard to wrap your head around, but what you realize in time is that most people who don't treat you special aren't special. You know what I mean? Think about it. They weren't kind to you, if they cannot be who you would have liked them to be, if it was more of a one-sided relationship where you were crossing the ocean for somebody who would barely cross the street for you, that's not special treatment. And when people don't treat you special, yet you make them out to be so special, that's putting them on a pedestal. We don't do that. People who aren't special because they don't treat you special are a dime a dozen. Men or women, whichever your preference to date. Until they prove they're special, treat them like a local bus. You can have another one in a minute. Matter of fact, he'll be here in a minute, to quote a sage philosopher. Beyonce knows. You know what I'm saying? Really, it's just we take this stuff so seriously, and it's like, wait a minute. I know it is serious because your partner selection is a big deal. Who you build a life with, who you give your heart to, big deal. Not a little deal, big deal. However, we don't put people on pedestals, especially people who don't treat us well. So that's one rule here. I want to dive into some things that I've noticed that complicate moving forward and getting on with your life and the goodness that is in store for you on the other side of missing someone or something that you should or can't want back for one reason or another, due to breakup, divorce, unrequited love, you name it. Okay. One thing I have noticed is that it can be especially hard to get over something or someone when you're prone to ruminate. You just loop the thoughts. In all your free time, you're just looping the thoughts. You know what I'm saying? In all your spare time, oop, back to the past. There's back to the future, and then you're back in the past, just stewing and brewing on what was and what couldn't be, and how this could have panned out differently, and analyzing this and that interaction with them from 2 weeks ago, 2 years ago. There are people who are still stuck on somebody from 2, 3, 5, 8 years ago in a whole new relationship, still stuck on the past, or dating just to pass the time, but still stuck on the past. You don't want to be that. I have noticed that if you are neurodivergent, ADHD, autism, even highly sensitive person, Elaine Aaron talks about a highly sensitive person. That's also considered a form of neurodivergence. There are differences in highly sensitive people's brains. I'm an HSP. Okay. When you are wired this way, you are more prone to, drum roll, ruminate. Okay. So what does that mean? Well, we've got to do more. We've got to do a little bit more active work to protect ourselves, to protect ourselves from our pattern of stewing and brewing on what was and what could not be. You know what I'm saying? What I have learned as someone who's prone to ruminate, but has gotten better at not doing it, is wow, okay, well, one, this machine of a brain that knows how to just simmer on things until he sort out his problems, this machine of a brain is actually a blessing in ways because that propensity to ruminate actually helps you get down to solving really solvable problems in your work. It helps you to lock in and be really creative when you ruminate on the right things. And so I found that sometimes when you are prone to ruminate, it's best to stay busy, not to avoid all your feelings, but to keep an active lifestyle that gives you a lot to look forward to so that you have more to look forward to than the past. And that one interaction that did not go to plan from the most recent date, the most recent breakup, the most recent divorce, the most recent person who's not giving you what you want when you want on your terms, right? I did another episode on anxious attachment, codependency, and all that too. Encourage you to check that out if this resonates with you. So, rumination, there's a lot we can do to stay active so that we don't just stew and brew and stew to our detriment. Wow, that's really freeing. So freeing. I'm curious to hear for you. What sorts of things do you find yourself wanting to do more of with your free time? Because now you have some. Let me tell you, cousins, one of the hardest pockets in my week to fill after my most devastating breakup I had, one of the hardest pockets of my week to fill was Sunday evening. Why was that? Because I associate Sunday evening with couple time. That was the time in the week where we do a little cooking dinner together. We prep for the week. When I tell you, when I tell ya that Sunday became one of the most dreaded parts of my week, and Sunday evening became the most hellish part of my week for the weeks and months after that breakup. No lie, no lie, because I couldn't help but associate that period of the week with what was, but was no longer that relationship. That's what grief will do to you. And so you also have to honor the cycle of grief. You really have to honor the cycle of grief, right? The denial, the anger of it all, the bargaining. Oh, could it be different? Right? The depression of it all and the acceptance. And it comes in waves. And anyone who wants to tell you otherwise, that you're just going to glow up and be unbothered after the breakup or the devastating loss, is lying to you, is lying to you. And what's funny is that same vacancy I felt in the wake of a relationship that ended is a similar vacancy I felt in the wake of a devastating friendship breakup. I'm not the sort of person who's just out here falling out with people, but you live long enough, you know what I'm saying? And you just go through things. Certain relationships run their course. Imagine how cluttered your life would be if you brought everyone with you from every chapter of your life. Huh? Crazy. You just wouldn't want to do that. And so I'll never forget I had this one friendship where I confronted the friend about the fact that I hadn't really heard from them in a while. I was like, "Hey, I value your friend. I value our friendship, and I love catching up with you." It's like I haven't really heard from you in like 6, 7 months. What's up? And they wrote me this constitutional dissertation of a text talking about, well, uh, I actually just stopped enjoying our conversations. And so I have decided to stop investing in this friendship. And I was like, oh my God. That is a level of honesty I was not ready for. And as somebody who values honesty, I was like, wow, that was a scalping. My God. You know? But it's like, okay, well, now that we've got that out of the way. Anywho, friendship breakups can be just as devastating as romantic breakups. The grief of it all. And there is no clean, neat way to move through anything and everything. But to first acknowledge and honor your feelings, don't do anything unhinged that you regret too much in too big a way. But then you get to move forward and decide how you're going to occupy that space. So again, you don't ruminate and stew and brew and stew in ways that make things worse in your head. In your head. You know what's another thing that comes to mind is It's harder to get over something or someone that you miss when you don't have a lot to look forward to in your life. Let's run that back again, DJ. I will talk until the cows come home, frankly, about how when it comes to getting over a person or a place or a space that you want, but it does not seem to want you for one reason or another. It is so much harder to get over that when you don't have much happening in your life. It's so much easier to move forward when you have a full life. And it just so happened that when the most devastating breakup happened in my life, it was just the perfect storm. It was the perfect like I they eliminated my department at my job 2 weeks prior, and the person I was dating was a very materialistic individual who saw I was on a promising path outside of that job, but was just like, "Oh, no. Let's add some fuel to this fire in this relationship." Now that he lost his job and just moved to New York City. And so that's what happened. And so then here I am, no money coming in, recently unemployed because they eliminated my department, reduction in workforce. And on top of that, freshly heartbroken. And on top of that, how I'm gonna live with what proof of income because I didn't have the progress. I didn't have all this to show with social media and coaching, business, and brand partnerships, and I didn't have all that. What a difference a few years makes when you really stay the course and build, right? Thank God for progress. I didn't have all that at the time. When I tell you, it's so much easier to move forward when you have a lot happening in your life. And at that time, it was like everything was crumbling. And while there were seeds of growth, things were happening. I was ascending to new heights in my music career at the time. Things were happening. I was connecting with longtime mentors. Yeba and different people were finding my work on the internet. That was wild. And this was all while my personal life was crumbling. Okay. It was doing Tower of Babylon. It was giving it was giving total demolition. Okay. The category was total demolition. And so having things to look forward to is always a plus. And going through that devastating experience the way I did when I did also showed me, we don't talk about this nearly enough, how it's also so much easier to get over something or someone when you have a larger safety net or support system. It's so much easier to bounce back from financial catastrophe, romantic devastation, divorce, heartbreak, job loss, you name it, when you have a larger support system and a larger safety net. And one of the biggest rookie mistakes I made after during that relationship in my ignorant youth was investing way more in that person's world than they invested in mine. And so then what does that do? Well, it creates this imbalanced dynamic where when that relationship ends, my internet cousin in prosperity and possibility, when that relationship ends, they are left with everything, and you are left with memories, right? And a whole bunch of personal relationships on your side of the street that you have not really tended to because your codependent pattern allowed you to get swept up in that other person's world. No thanks. No way, Jose. Never again. I learned. And it took years to really metabolize all of the lessons connected to that experience so that I never repeat those things again. That's one big mistake a lot of people make is pouring way more into that other person's world than that person pours into theirs. Befriending all that person's friends, but that person doesn't really befriend any of yours, right? And then it's like, wow, in the wake of that, what do you have to show for it? So always maintain your life. Whether or not you're dating someone, maintain your social life. Maintain a bright, vibrant, and full life. because it is so much easier to not be all limerent and obsessive about something or someone, to not be overly attached when you have a lot going for yourself outside of that. You know what I'm saying? If you do, you do. If you don't, you don't. You can let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences on this. All this to say, you're allowed to miss people, you're allowed to miss places and spaces and even friends. But if the things run its course, if you want it and it doesn't want you back, what do we do, we cousins? What do we do? We keep an active, busy, full life, right? We make sure we have a lot to look forward to outside of the things we can't control, the people we can't control, and we live in abundance because we know that people who don't treat us special aren't special. I find, let me tell you, through my coaching work with leaders, I find that some of the most empowered, powerful, smart, accomplished people struggle unbelievably on the relational front. And you wouldn't believe it based on all they've accomplished and all they have to show for their degrees and their success and the accolades. You would not believe the extent to which they struggle in their relationships because success for many high achievers can be easier than relationship. Because success, when you are disciplined and good at following rules, can be pretty formulaic. It can be pretty much more or less up to you. If you do what you've got to do. If you get the degree, check. You got the law degree, check. Now you can do corporate law. If you get good at real estate and you make a certain number of calls and build the relationships, check, check, check. Okay, you can sell a bunch of properties. If you learn the social media game and get good at content creation, that blah, 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 blah. Okay, you can make money with content. But relationships is different because it's like, wait a minute. I can't control this other person. And wait, what do I have to do to experience the sort of love and connection I want? Well, most of us default to whatever toxic pattern we learned from childhood, and we carry that out on the big screen as adults. That sounded weird, the big screen. You know what I mean, though? And you don't want that. All this to say, it does not matter how accomplished you are, you can still have a lot of work to do on the relational front. Anywho, what's your experience with this? If you are a heart-centered visionary in the season of elevation in your work or relationships, take the quiz and check out the resources down below to learn more about how we might work together. And I just love putting good people on and bringing good people together as well. So we'll talk soon. And if you found value from this, send the pod over to a friend. We'll talk soon, you cousins. Peace.